Sudan says its first multi-party elections in years will go ahead on schedule despite protests, but with the main opposition parties pulling out, what will the fallout be on the future of this beleaguered country? This is the Inside Story. Hello there, welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. Sudan's elections will go ahead next week, so said the country's electoral commission over the weekend. This as one of the main opposition parties threatened to boycott the vote, and another has pulled out already. Voting is due to take place from the 11th to the 13th of April. It will be the first multi-party election since 1986. But it's being seen by some as a way to legitimise the country's president, Omar al-Bashir. He seized power in 1989 and is currently under indictment by the International Criminal Court for alleged human rights violations in Darfur. Last week, the opposition Umma Party declared it would pull out of the elections if various demands, including some electoral reforms, were not met. Meanwhile, the United States Special Envoy to Sudan says despite the political wranglings, he has confidence that the elections will be as free and fair as possible.
These people have gone to great lengths to ensure that that the people of Sudan will have access to polling places, and that the procedures and processes will ensure transparency and will ensure that the people's vote get registered and counted in the best way possible.
Well, now, the Umma Party is just one of a number of opposition groups threatening to boycott Sudan's elections. Last week, the candidate for the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, Yasir Arman, withdrew from the race altogether. The SPLM has served in a coalition with President Omar Bashir's National Congress Party since 2005. The unity between the two parties was part of a peace deal known as the Comprehensive Peace Agreement that attempted to end a two-decade civil unrest. Arman cited fraud and security fears as the reason behind his departure. However, some analysts believe, amongst other things, that his decision aims to prevent al-Bashir from legitimising his rule. Regardless of the reasoning, there's little doubt that the withdrawal of the SPLM has thrown the credibility of Sudan's first multi-party election in 24 years into question. Well, joining us to discuss this further in Khartoum, Sadiq Yusuf, who's from the Juba Alliance Group, a group from the south that's taking part in the elections. In Dubai, Hamdi Abdurrahman, Professor of Political Science at Cairo University. Sadiq Yusuf, first of all, why would the SPLM pull out of this election? After all, this surely is their best hope, and this is Sudan's best hope, isn't it?
In fact, at the Juba conference in last September, the political parties there came to an agreement that to carry out elections, fair, democratic elections, there are certain things which hamper that, especially the laws which will not allow democratic participation, the right to hold rallies, the right to speak, the right for the press, and other political rights. The second issue was the problem of Darfur. We think that partial elections will not solve the problem of the Sudan. And elections without Darfur, which constitutes about 1/3 of the country, is impossible for political democratic transformation of the country. War is still going on in Darfur. The state of emergency has been there since June 1889. That is for the last 20 years, state of emergency. There is no right of any political rights. The movement is not possible because of security.
Okay.
The armed militias are everywhere, and that is the main problem. And we said that to participate in elections, those problems should be solved.
Okay, well, let's bring in Hamdi Abdurrahman from Dubai. From your perspective, sitting there in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates, big irregularities in this election, war in Darfur. It makes you wonder how effective these elections can be, doesn't it?
No, I don't believe in that because, you know, if you compare Sudan with other examples like Iraq and Afghanistan, there is violence in Iraq and Afghanistan is under occupation, and you have a free and transparent as much as possible in these two countries. So in Sudan, you have an election, you know, according to the Univasha agreement in 2005, and it is due. And all these political forces and opposition were demonstrated in the street to assure the time of the election and to be held according to the schedule. Now, when the moment of the truth came to the Sudan, some of these opposition groups say, look, it will be rigged, it will be false, so it will not be transparent. So I think that it is not the case in Sudan. We will have the election will be held according to the schedule for 3 reasons. Number one, you have the two partners, the two main partners, the NCP and the SPLM, will insist that the election will be implemented according to the schedule. Number two, you have the West. If you listen to the American envoy to Sudan this week, who said that the election, he is satisfied about the implementation, the preparation process, and it will be transparent.
Yeah, well, hold on a second. Let me just, can I just pick you up on that? Scott Gratian, the US envoy who you're talking about, his words are he has confidence the election will start on time, fine, and that they will be as fair as possible. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement, is it?
It is, you know. This is for...
Yeah, you know, you carry on, Mr. Abdurrahman.
You know, it will, you have the monitor, it's already heading to Khartoum. You have the AU and the ex-Ghanaian president, President John Kufuor, who will lead the AU, the African Union team to monitor, the European Union monitor. So you have not only the United States support, but you have the international community support to have the first multi-party election in Sudan since 1986. So it is not a matter of support. You have the rules of the games were set up, and it was a consensus among all political groups in Sudan about these rules. I mean, the establishment of the National Electoral Commission, the electoral laws, and all these procedures. And they were pushing to have the election. And now, before the 5 days ahead of the election, you have some who said, look, we are afraid of rigging the election. Let us boycott it. This is impossible.
Let's put that to Sadiq Yusuf. I mean, it's true to say that the SPLM were instrumental in the setting up of the CPA in 2005, and you can't just suddenly come out and say, well, actually, we don't like the procedure.
Yes, in fact, I will start with that. SPLM didn't say they will participate in the elections. Even their nominee for presidential elections has been declared flatly that they will not join in the elections for the presidency and will not join for elections in Darfur, and they might not join elections in all north of the Sudan. The second thing, Mr. Abdurrahman was speaking about the monitors, international monitors. Recently, Carter Center published its report on the 17th of March, and in which they stated that elections are not fair and there is no political atmosphere for carrying out elections. Even the president himself threatened to throw them and expel them from the country because they said that. Those are the international observers of international, and I don't think anybody can say the Carter Center is not impartial. They are impartial. They have no interest to side any of the political parties, and they said clearly there is no atmosphere for fair and democratic elections. And this was witnessed by one of the international observers. And
Okay.
the second thing, during last December, we demonstrated in the streets, asking in front of the parliament, asking for a democratic security law, and all those demonstrations were harshly beaten and destroyed. And even some ministers, parliament members, and other political parties leaders were imprisoned. They were arrested. They stayed for 24 hours in prison. And Yasser Arman, the nominee for presidency, was harshly beaten in the police station.
Okay, well, let's put some of those points to Hamdi Abdurrahman in Dubai. It's certainly true. We had Sadiq Yusuf there talking about the Carter Center, but also the Crisis Group talking about, let me quote them, the consequences for Darfur are catastrophic, manipulated census, crooked voter registration, gerrymandered electoral districts, and so on and so forth. I mean, the criticisms are out there from the international community.
We have to convince that there's some irregularities. You have a war still going on in Darfur, but you are talking about a very huge country. What about the other parts? You have the south, you have the north, but you have Darfur. As I said earlier, that you have the same concerns in Iraq and in Afghanistan, and however, you had election there, and it was a democratic election. So you are in a transitional period. And according to the peace process, the Nevada agreement, you have to end this transitional period and to look after where the real challenge facing Sudan, which is the referendum in the 2011. So I think that we have some concern. This is everywhere, not only in Sudan, but even in other parts of Africa. If you consider the case of Nigeria, which is a rising democracy, there are a lot of concern, and even reports of the monitors and observers that there were irregularities. But you accept the result as a transitional election in the face of consolidating democracy. So you have to take the first step forward. But if we stick on the reforms, the electoral reform, and to have everything 100%, that means it's endless. So you have to keep this in your mind.
Okay, listen, we need to move this on a little bit, because I just want to say that next week's elections are all part of that crucial peace deal that was, as we've been discussing, thrashed out back in 2005. That's the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, or CPA. It was supposed to end the Second Sudanese Civil War and create a timetable for a referendum in the south. The south of the country has, of course, been fought over since Sudan's independence back in the 1950s. Among the many issues it deals with, the CPA gives provision for assessing the region's oil wealth and dividing it with the north. In December last year, it was finally agreed that a referendum on the South's independence would take place next year, in January 2011, in fact, and it's seen as crucial to the stability of the entire country. But the current president, Omar al-Bashir, has threatened to cancel next year's vote after the various opposition parties pulled out, as we've been discussing, of the presidential elections. Well, so Sadiq Yusuf, this talk of a deal between the SPLM and the government, do you think it's true, this business about how if the government is allowed to carry on with the election then and win it, and Bashir gets his place as president again, then he would allow a smooth succession vote to take place during the referendum next year?
There are several rumors roaming about in Khartoum now about a deal between SPLM and NCP. But the fact, if those deals are there, that means they are engineering separation of the Sudan, that the north will be governed by NCP and the south will be governed by the SPLM, and they seek for a peaceful separation of the two countries. I think these are the rumors in the town now, and they think about this. The deal is that they come to an agreement about the BA, the boundaries, and the petrol and the oil, dividing the areas for the oil, accepting the report, the decision of the court in Belgium, the High Court, about the BA, and coming to an agreement about the boundaries with the South. And that means the Sudan is going to be a separate two Sudan governments. Government in the South, a government in the North. In the South, governed by SPLM, and in the North by NCP.
So, Mr. Abdurrahman, in Dubai, what do you think about this talk of a deal? Do you think it's true? Do you think the rumors are true?
I believe there is a kind of deal between the two partners that, you know, the withdrawal of Mr. Yasser Arman, is a unilateral decision that without any consultation with the opposition alliance. So there is, and even in Darfur, that means there is a little chance for the SPLM to have a support or to win in these areas. So I believe that this is a tactical movement, and there is a kind of belief among the SPLM that let us have the South. We are satisfied of the South. Even the decision of, nominating Mr. Arman, he is not from the first line of the SPLM cadre. So they deserve it, the real leaders, to keep them in the South. So I believe that, yes, there is some kind of a deal not to challenge al-Bashir. So the most possible scenario is to have the status quo will prevail after election, that al-Bashir will govern Sudan and he will legitimize his rule. And in the South, Salva Kiir will be the president. And in return, you will have the smooth transition, whether to have a unified Sudan or a separate independent state.
Wouldn't it be a dangerous game to play, given that you wouldn't be certain, or they couldn't be certain that Omar al-Bashir would actually honour the deal, because his party is vehemently against succession, isn't it?
Yeah, you see that I think everybody, the hearts and the minds of all Sudanese, not to have the violence again. So even in the South, if you look at the thousands who went out the street to celebrate al-Bashir during his campaign, this is true. This is not an image or a false image by the government. So I think the consensus now among the Sudanese, even in the north or the south, not to come back to the long, dark tunnel, or to get out of the neck of the bottle. So I think this is to make sure that there is no return to violence, and to believe that there is a kind of a peaceful deal between the two partners in order to share the power in Sudan, whether you have a united one or a two-state scenario.
Another reason, Sadiq Yusuf, why this is a dangerous game to play, isn't it? The fact that there's a serious danger of this kind of stance inflaming the situation and stirring up yet more violence, not only in Darfur, but also in the south.
I think it will result in other parts in the Sudan where they would not accept that, especially Darfur, the Nuba Mountains, the South Kordofan, and probably in other parts of the country. The outcome of the elections, if they are held in April, without the participation of the main opposition parties, the outcome of the elections will not be accepted. And we hope that Sudan will not be another Kenya, and the opposition parties or the opposition groups will not go to riots in opposing the results of the election. But we are not sure, and nobody will be sure what will happen if the elections took place now, at the time where most of the people are rejecting the results. They have certain reservations about the integrity of the elections.
But it seems to be the case that these elections are going to go ahead, whatever, doesn't it? So what you're saying could well come true.
Yes, but we are, yes, they are, the government is insisting on carrying out the elections on the 11th of April. But I am speaking about what will be the outcome of those elections. And we are afraid that the results will not be accepted by the people who boycotted the elections and will not be accepted by several factions in the country. Even the armed groups in Darfur threatened that they will obstruct the elections, and the outcome might not be very bad, but we hope it will not be as another Kenya or another Iran.
Okay, Hamdi Abdurrahman, what do you think?
But the probability is there.
So I think there is a division amongst the opposition parties. You have, for example, the old Democratic Unionist Party led by Mohammed Osman al-Mirghani reversed the course of boycott and declared again that the party will participate in the election. And you have the People Congress Party led by Hassan al-Turabi will participate. So you have the SPLM participating in the election. So I think you don't have a unified position among the opposition groups. Anyway, the lack of consensus in the Sudanese politics will complicate a situation which is already more complicated. And I agree that if this continues, so the scenario after the election will be more fragmentation, more gloomy picture, and nobody knows which this scenario will lead Sudan to. I think this is more dangerous for the Sudanese.
Sadiq Yusuf, isn't there a very real danger that a chance is being missed here? A chance to bring democracy to southern Sudan, perhaps as soon as next year, and an opportunity to start to heal, decades of turmoil. And this may just be thrown away just days before the election is due.
In fact, this was not thrown days before, because since last September last year, we addressed the NCP of our opinion about the elections, and our demands were very few: democratic atmosphere to participate in the elections, and to participate and to allow all political parties and all NGO organizations in Darfur to participate in pacifying and in the negotiations at Doha and in other places. And those two proposals were very easy to be carried out, but NCP adamantly stood against that. And I think the NCP is responsible for all the difficulties now we are facing in the Sudan. And Mr. Abdurrahman now agrees with me partially that the outcome of the elections might not be a smooth one, and it might be possible to pave the way for democratic or peaceful transformation. And to avoid that, all we ask for is to postpone the elections until November and to come an agreement about the laws and about Darfur. And those are the main two objections to the elections. And I think there is ample time to do that, and this will not affect the referendum. The referendum can take place in January, just 2 months after the general elections. And if the people in the south went for separation, there will be a peaceful transition for that.
Okay. Well, let's see what the days ahead bring. We've run right out of time. We appreciate your perspective, both Sadiq Yusuf and Hamdi Abdurrahman. Thank you very much indeed for your time on this issue.
All right.
And thanks for watching this edition of Inside Story. Of course, welcome your comments and suggestions. Just email them to us at insidestory@aljazeera.net. From me, Nick Clark, it's goodbye.